Hey C, I challenge you to love yourself more.
I will challenge myself to help all my peers, especially my non-woman peers, to understand how disrupting the patriarchy benefits all of us.
I challenge myself to confront toxic masculinity.
I will challenge myself to not be so hard on myself and learn to give myself permission to be okay with not doing anything and just choosing to relax.
I challenge society to learn more about the successes of women.
I challenge myself to learn as much as I can about other cultures.
I will challenge myself to support the mothers in my life and push back against mom shaming. Mothers are making the best decision given their circumstances.
I challenge the Applebee community to use more gender-inclusive language.
I will challenge myself to both shop more sustainably because fast fashion is also a women's rights issue, and also to support my female colleagues in their growth.
I challenge myself and others to be a good listener to those around us.
I challenge myself to be more confident.
I challenge our generation to always educate ourselves and one another about gender equality.
I challenge myself to empower others.
I challenge myself to confront toxic masculinity.
I challenge myself to step out of my comfort zone.
I challenge myself to stand up for myself and all the people around me.
I challenge myself and men around me to use our voices to support women.
I will challenge myself and all those around me to take an intersectional lens when we look at feminism. Happy Women's History Month, Applebee! Let us all continue fighting for gender equality and an overall better world. In this video, we'll be highlighting the importance of intersectional feminism because the freedom of women is contingent on the liberation of all women. And throughout history, the feminist movement has often failed to recognize the contributions and the intersecting identities of women who weren't white or heterosexual or cisgender or able-bodied or wealthy. And that has to change. So, we're so proud and honored to be sharing this chapel service with you. Happy Women's History Month!
Intersectionality is a concept often misunderstood. When we discuss issues in social justice, we often spotlight one identity or issue at a time to understand the experiences of individuals within a community. However, trying to understand the experiences of others is difficult when we break people down into singular attributes. Intersectionality is a more accurate way of understanding how people are affected by the society we live in. By looking at people's overlapping identities, it helps conceptualize the barriers faced by certain groups and allows for us to understand that oppression is not straightforward, but a complex machine that requires a deep understanding to dismantle. Intersectional feminism critically examines how being a woman in society can contribute to and build upon oppression faced due to individuals having a variety of identities. There exists a need for people to examine feminism through a lens of intersectionality, as women have not been able to progress together. An example of this is that despite women in Canada being given the right to vote in the 1920s, it was decades before Indigenous women could do the same. In fact, it was also only the case that in the 1990s, it became required for voting stations to be accessible to people and women with disabilities. Avoid looking at intersectional feminism as a point system, because this is inaccurate and does not accurately portray people's experiences. Rather, intersectional feminism acknowledges that within a larger group of women, women who are of color, women who are transgender, women who are disabled, and women who are at a socioeconomic disadvantage have unique experiences in society from one another. By examining how different identities can affect women within society, we can better understand how to move women forward together, leaving nobody behind.
The future is not female, nor is the future male. Let the present be about loving one another so that the future won't be for one sex or one gender, but for healing from a past that has long passed, yet we still cling so its pain will prevail. The future must be for all of us. The future will be the present that we entail. Farida D.
Happy Women's History Month. On March 8, 1911, the first International Women's Day was celebrated in Denmark, Austria, Germany, and Switzerland as a protest of over 100 million people. In 1978 in California, the first Women's History Week was celebrated, and now it's become Women's History Month. celebrated nationally and internationally. In 1991, just 30 years ago, Appleby became a co-ed school. All of these are things to celebrate because this month is Women's History Month. How do we make this a month to both celebrate and fight for change? This year's chapel theme has been disrupting and inviting. This month is a month that we invite celebration, a time to remember all the successes of women and the ongoing fight for gender equality. At the same time, it's a month to disrupt, acknowledge inequality, and remember the need for intersectionality. It has been a month full of disruptions that we must acknowledge, recognize, and remember. Before I mention some of the events that have happened in the past few weeks, I wanted to give a trigger warning for any who may be uncomfortable with mention of sexual or physical assault, racial targeting, missing persons, and gun violence. If you would like to skip this section of the video, please feel free. On March 3rd, a woman named Sarah Everin was reported missing and later found kidnapped and murdered. Her death has sparked global conversations about the assault and abuse of women worldwide. This conversation can be hard for many, especially the disproportionate number of women who have experienced sexual abuse and physical assault. Everin's story is important for all, but especially here in Canada with the disproportionate rates of missing and murdered Indigenous women, the increased dangers faced by trans, non-binary, and queer folks, and the increased pressure on society under COVID to look for all of the inequalities that we face. Conversations about abuse and assault are not easy. They shouldn't be, but they are important for all people to have. On March 16th, 6 Asian women and 2 others were fatally shot in 2 Asian-owned businesses. This hatred cannot be tolerated and is connected in so many ways to white supremacy and misogyny. This year, throughout COVID, hate crimes targeting Asian people have spiked largely because of the unfair and irresponsible connection people make between COVID and the Asian community. The hashtag #StopAsianHate and hate is a virus has been trending all over social media and in protests. But what does this have to do with Women's History Month? Feminism, the fight for gender equality, the fight for equality in general must be intersectional. Because none of what I've mentioned are isolated events. And it's the responsibility of people with privilege to combat and speak up when we see injustice. Both of the events I mentioned are not isolated issues. They are deep-rooted problems that come from hatred, bigotry, and oppression. As a community, this month, we celebrate women's history and the fight for gender equality. At the same time, we recognize that hatred, dangers, and fear exist in this world because of intersecting forms of oppression like patriarchy, white supremacy, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, and so many more. This month we must remember to both invite the celebrations and recognize the disruptions so that we can fight for a better world for all people together. Happy Women's History Month. May this be a month that you both celebrate and continue fighting.